On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the highly anticipated rematch between Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 331, taking place September 19th, Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles. My name is James Lynch. If you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats and intangibles, and then I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight at the end of the video. After you're done watching, go to the comment section. Let me know your prediction for this rematch. Would love to hear from you. And should mention at the time I'm doing this, the UFC has not officially announced the fight. That's why you see rumor here on Tapology, but a lot of legitimate media members have confirmed this fight will take place. So thought it would be fun to kind of talk about it. It's one of the biggest fights this year, one of the biggest rematches of all time. Looking forward to this one. So let's break it down and have some fun with this, okay? Quick tail to tape between these two. Arman is 29 years old, 36 years old for Oliveira, so big age gap there. 5'7" to 5'10", 72.5 to 74. So Charles Oliveira going to be a little bit bigger in this spot with the height and reach, but he's also a number of years older. Let's start with Charles, the former lightweight champion, and I guess former BMF champion, since there's no BMF title on the line. I don't know how that works. Anyways, like I mentioned, 5-round fight, so going to be very interesting here. I believe this is the main event, which is interesting because obviously the Van and Tyra fight, or Van and Pantoja fight, is for an actual UFC title. No title on the line here. So I mentioned it there. Oliveira 37-11 with 1 no contest. He's got 10 knockouts, 22 submissions, and 5 decisions in his career. He's 36 years old, 5'10" with a 74-inch reach. He'll have a 1.5 reach advantage in this fight. He'll also have a height advantage in this fight by 3 inches as well. Trains at a shootbox Diego Lima. He's the former lightweight champion, like I mentioned. He's got the most submission wins in UFC history at 16. He's got the most finishes in UFC history at 21. He's got the most performance of the night bonuses in UFC history at 16. And he's got the most bonus awards in UFC history at 21. Not bad for, for Charles Oliveira. Did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros in March of 2008. Made his UFC debut in August of 2010. He is 25-11 in the UFC. That's a crazy amount of fights. When we think back on it, he's got 16 stoppage victories. Some notable wins for Charles include 2 wins over Max Holloway, 1 win over Max Holloway. He's also got the win over Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Beneil Dariush, Kevin Lee, and Tony Ferguson. Some notable losses include Arman Tsarukyan, Islam Makhachev, Paul Felder, Anthony Pettis, and Cub Swanson. Obviously, some of those at 145. Sad. Just one big layoff in his career. That was the one from Dariush to Arman Tsarukyan. There was a 308-day layoff, but going into this fight, coming off the Max Holloway fight, just 196 days separates the Holloway fight to the Arman fight. So pretty active this year, going to be fighting twice, just like he did last year, which is great. The only fight that he's had that's been close recently was the first Arman fight. So I wanted to show you this website, MMA Decisions. This is where media can submit their scorecards for the fight. Arman defeating him in this fight by decision. And you look here, the majority of media members did score the fight for Arman. So if my count's correct here, 21 media members scored the fight for Arman, just 8 scored it for Oliveira. So most people did feel like Arman did deserve to win that fight, but it was close. So do have to mention that when we're talking about this rematch between these two. Let's look at Oliveira's stats. Significant strikes landed per minute is 3.23. His striking accuracy is at 55%. His striking defense is at 48%. His takedown average is 2.29. His takedown accuracy is at 39%. His takedown defense is at 54%. And his sub average is 2.6. So some pretty impressive stats there. The takedown average especially 2.29. So looking pretty good going into this rematch. So that's everything you need to know about Charles Oliveira going into the rematch with Arman Tsarukyan. Let's take a closer look at Arman and what he brings to the table. So you look at it there, 23-3 record for Arman. He's got 9 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 9 decisions. He's 29 years old, 5'7" with a 72-inch reach. So he'll be 7 years younger than Charles heading into this fight. I believe he's training at Santos Studio for this camp. That's the Jackson podcast camp. That's the one where Chimaev trained. Looks like he's training there. Did a quick Instagram search. So that, I believe the fight before that, he was in Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, interesting. He's trained at ATT. He's trained all over the world. But yeah, it looks like Santos Studio for this one. Made his amateur debut in 2015. Made his MMA debut later that year and his UFC debut in April of 2019. When I say MMA debut, I meant pro debut, by the way. Arman is 10-2 in the UFC. Some notable wins include, Arman is, 10-2 in the UFC. 4 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, Joel Alvarez, will include him in there because a lot of people like him, and Dan Hooker. So those are some big wins that he's had. The only losses he's had in the UFC were the ones to Islam, which was on short notice, and the Gamrot fight as well. Gamrot fight was really close. If we go have a quick look at that, you can see on MMADecisions.com that Gamrot defeating Tsarukyan. If we go look at that, that fight was back in 2022. Majority of media members did feel like Arman deserved the nod in that one. So they had, if you look at it here, they had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Media members scored the fight for Arman, and just 6, 7 had it for Gamrot. So people feeling like that fight maybe should have gone the other way, but wanted to point that out anyways. Arman's had a few layoffs in his career. I mean, there's a couple ways you can look at the layoffs, obviously, because he's been very active in RAF and in grappling. But if we want to go just from his overall UFC career, going from the OAM, the Olivier Aubin Mercier fight way back in 2019 to the Davy Ramos fight, there was a 357-day layoff. The longest layoff in his UFC career was obviously the Oliveira fight to the Dan Hooker fight. There was a 588-day layoff in that one. So that's the longest layoff of his career. That was 2024. Sorry. So if you look at the layoff that he's had, going from Oliveira to Dan Hooker, there was a 588-day layoff. And then going from Dan Hooker into this fight, just talking strictly UFC fights, there will be a 301-day layoff in this fight. If we're going by the most recent fights that he's had, if you want to go from the grappling match that he's had, there's only 49 days from the grappling match to the Oliveira rematch, and then 63 days from the Colby fight, which he ended up losing in RAF. So just wanted to point that out, take that for what it's worth. Obviously, Arman's been very active while he's been waiting to get a title shot, which he didn't even end up getting. He's getting the Charles rematch, but very active, but obviously not UFC fights. Got to point that out as well. Let's look at Arman's stats here. So you can see significant strikes landed per minute is 3.85, so that is higher than Charles one. 50% striking accuracy. Striking defense is at 54%. You just get hit a little bit. If you look at Charles, he's 3.23, and he's at 48% striking defense. So Arman's got that a little bit higher. Takedown average with Arman is 3.26. That's ahead of Charles 2.29. Takedown accuracy is at 37%. Charles is at 39. Takedown defense is 75% for Arman, and just 54% for Charles. So something to keep in mind there when we're kind of comparing the two. We don't have odds for this fight yet, again, because we're waiting for this to be officially official. But if we go on Tapology and we look at the picks done by the fans, you can see 60% of people taking Arman, 40% taking Oliveira. Most people picking Arman by decision at 70.4. There's a small percentage, 6.3 by submission, and there's 23% of them taking him by knockout. With Charles, it's 36.9% by decision, 54.6% by submission, and just 8.5% by KO TKO. All right, which way am I leaning on this one? This is a tough one because Oliveira looked great in that last fight with Max Holloway, right? I mean, we should point that out. If we go look at the stats in that one, outlanding Holloway 50-26. I believe he was a betting underdog in that fight. Total strikes was 110-73. He looked awesome in that fight. So really dominant victory over a guy in Holloway who had a nice win over Justin Gaethje prior to that. So can't ignore that. And that fight was earlier this year, right? So he fought Holloway back in March. So you like the fact that Oliveira's been active. He's had two dominant performances now, the Gamrot fight and the Holloway fight, since getting knocked out by Topuria. So is that enough to beat Arman? I don't think it is. I think Arman is going to win this fight, and I think he's going to win by decision. Now, look, there's a lot of concerns here with Arman. Obviously, the fact that he hasn't been that active in the UFC cage, I think, is something that works against him. I know he's been doing these wrestling matches, but again, he's not fighting the best opposition in these spots either, and it's not a typical MMA fight. I have some concerns with him training at Santos Studio. We'll see how that camp ends up. Is that the right training partners for him? I know he's going to have all the resources possible, but again, you saw with Chimaev, I know a lot of that was the weight cut, but you got to worry a little bit about that camp because Chimaev did the same thing. I mentioned the first fight was very competitive. I'm expecting the same thing here. Like, I think it's going to be very similar to the first fight, just with 2 other rounds added in. Because if you remember, their first fight was only 3 rounds, right? If I'm not mistaken, let me double check that. I'm pretty sure it was, because that wasn't the main event. That was it was a 3 5-minute rounds. So only a 3-round fight in that one. If it was a couple ones longer, we'll have to see how it goes. If you remember, Charles had Arman in some submission danger multiple times, especially in the opening round guillotine, but Arman survived, made the better adjustments. So we know that Arman has good submission defense as well. You would think the 5 rounds would favor Arman, even though Charles obviously is, been champion and all that. But I think with Arman, being a lot younger, 7 years younger, that's going to be a big difference there. Oliveira does have a height and reach advantage in this fight, but I don't think it's going to be too much that Arman can't handle. I don't think Oliveira will knock him out. We have seen Arman get hit a little bit. I remember the Joaquim Silva fight. That was a bit concerning. But I don't think Oliveira has really knocked anyone out really in a while. I mean, what was his last knockout win? It was Dariush, who always gets knocked out in the first round, and that was 3 years ago. So I'm not too worried about that in this fight, right? As opposed to, like, for example, Arman fighting Ilia Topuria. I think I think if you're looking for a pick, if you're looking for a method of victory, I think it's Arman decision or Charles submission. But again, Arman showed in that first fight that he's able to fend off those submissions as well. I would argue that Arman's striking has become much cleaner since their first fight. His ability to mix takedowns with boxing combinations will help him sort of edge things out a little bit. Saying that, though, Arman did beat a battered up Dan Hooker in his last fight, but still, it was a dominant win. We can't ignore that either. So, yeah, I think you could see a decision, possibly a split in this one for Arman. Super close fight. I do have some concerns with Arman. And then the last thing I'll mention, the weight cut, right? What happened with Islam? Was it a weight cut? Was it a back injury? UFC's telling us, and a lot of people are saying, oh, he wasn't going to make the weight. That's why he pulled out and said it was a back injury. I've heard from people at ATT when he was training there at the time saying that it was a back injury. That was legit. I don't know, but it is, we should mention that there's been some talk about Arman being too heavy. Well, he does like eating a lot, but should point out that Arman's only missed weight one time, and that was back in 2021. So something to keep an eye on, though, anyways, about the weight cut, with him trying to make the mark, because Arman hasn't looked this skinny in a while. So that's something to keep in mind, too. So again, expecting a close fight, but I do think Arman does edge this one out. I can't ignore the 7-year age gap and the fact that Arman, again, looks to be one of the best lightweights in the world, and maybe is the best lightweight in the world. I don't know. We'll have to see, but I'm gonna go with Arman in this fight. I think he does end up getting it done over Charles Oliveira. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, which way you're leaning on this fight. Again, the betting odds are not out yet. I do imagine Arman will be favored just because he is younger, but you never know. Again, Oliveira put on a great performance against Max Holloway in his last fight, and maybe people do believe he can get it done here. And I think there's a possibility of him doing it. This is one of the toughest fights to pick this year. But like I said, I think Arman will get it done. So let me know your prediction in the comments. Would love to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. This is Early Look. This is where I preview some upcoming notable fights. If there's any fights you guys want me to preview in the coming weeks, obviously I do the main events, the title fights, all that stuff. Let me know. Love to hear from you. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll talk to you guys soon.